Hey guys, thank you for joining me at Complete in Christ. We continue talking about an undivided heart series that we started several weeks ago. We looked at a passage in Psalm 86 and just talked about the importance of having an undivided heart before the Lord. A heart that loves the Lord above everything else, that bows in His presence, that has a desire to honor Him with all of our life, and kind of what that looks like, and some of the characteristics, I would say, of an undivided heart. And last time we looked at Psalm 86, we talked about having a thankful heart and how that we have so much to be thankful for, but there's many, many days of our lives and of my life that we don't live thankful. Man, we should be exceedingly thankful for what God has done for us through the provision of Jesus. And we need to live with a thankful heart. As we continue with that thought of an undivided heart, I want to move from Psalm 86 to Psalm 51. And I want to look at part of Psalm 51 over the next few weeks as we look at David and the life of David and when David came clean. And when Psalm 51 was written after the incident with Bathsheba and when he was confronted about his sin, and this is basically how David responded to that. Today I want to read Psalm 51 verses 1 through 4. And today I want to talk to you about an honest heart. We see here where David becomes honest about his sin, where David becomes honest before the Lord, and just how important it is that if I'm going to have an undivided heart, that will lead me to an honest heart, a heart that is open and honest before a holy God, and understand the importance of an honest heart. And I think two things that we see here, and I think we'll cover the first one today, is that an honest heart will lead me to understand the importance of confession, but it also leads me to understand the importance of cleansing. Now look what he says, and what David says in Psalm 51, beginning with verse 1, and I'm going to read through verse 4. It says, "Be gracious to me, O Lord, according to your loving kindness. According to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions. My sin is ever before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you speak and you're blameless when you judge." You see, an honest heart will lead me to take ownership of what I've done that's wrong before God. An honest heart will lead me to admit that I was wrong. An honest heart before God, when God convicts me and God shows me what I've done, I will simply admit and take ownership of my sin. As David says here, my sin, my transgression, my iniquity, those things that I have done that are wrong in your sight, I take ownership of them, and I'm asking you to forgive me. See, confession is vitally important in walking with Jesus. Confession is vitally important in having an undivided heart. An undivided heart, a heart that longs to be right before God. When God convicts in our lives through the power of the Holy Spirit, we will be open, we will be honest, and we will confess our sin. I'm going to read through this again, and I want you to listen for words like my or mine, and how David took ownership of what he had done. Listen to this. It says, "Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to your greatness, according to the greatness of your compassion." Listen to this. "Blot out my transgression, my rebellion." What I did that was wrong, that I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. "Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity." Those things I did that was wrong, that my sin. Cleanse me from my sin. "For I know my transgression," David said. "My sin is ever before me. Against you and you only have I sinned, and I have done what is evil in your sight. Therefore, you are justified when you speak, and you're blameless when you judge." You hear David say, my sin, my transgression, my iniquity. David took ownership of what he had done. And he come to the point to where he says, "God, look, that whatever you do, you're justified. You're right because you're blameless when you judge. God, whatever you do, I know because of who you are, it's going to be right. It's going to be the right thing. It's going to be the just thing. It's going to be the fair thing because that's who you are. And that's how you treat us as your children. As I think about confession and just the importance of confession, I think it's one of the things that we've kind of lost in our culture is taking ownership when I'm wrong, taking ownership when I've done something that's not right. We live in a culture that does not teach that a whole lot anymore. I can remember growing up that man, for me and my family, that when I was wrong, I was expected to admit that I was wrong. When I was at school and I did something wrong, I was expected to admit that I had done wrong. Blame was not shifted to someone else. Man, I've talked to many, many people over the past several years, and it seems to be that in most cases, people always want to blame someone else for where they are and for what they've done. David said, it's my transgression, it's my iniquity, it's my sin. Against you and you only, God, have I sinned. And whatever you do to me because of this, you are right because you always do the right thing. So David confessed. Well, what does that mean? When I think about confessed or confession, I think about 1 John 1:9, where John, as an aged man, was writing to these people he really cared about that were dealing with sin. And verse 9 says that if I confess my sin, he's faithful and just to forgive me and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. If I confess, if I admit it, if I see it like God sees it, if I call it what he calls it, if I take responsibility for what I've done. You see, if I lied, I need to say, God, I lied. If I cheated, God, I cheated. If I had impure thoughts that I should not have had, I need to admit it. I need to take ownership of it, and I need to confess it before God. An honest heart will lead me to true confession before a holy God. And I'll begin to realize how important that is. Now, I would agree that people can influence you, people can influence me. But the bottom line is they may influence me, but the choice is mine. I choose whether I'm going to disobey God or not. I choose whether I'm going to lie. I choose whether or not I'm going to cheat. I choose the thoughts that go through my mind, and I need to take responsibility for what I've done. And 1 John 1:9 says, if I confess it, if I admit it, because of who he is and what he's done, he's faithful and he's just. He always does things right. He always does the right thing because he is a just, fair God. He said he's faithful and just. He always does exactly what he says. That's who he is. That because of what he's done for us, it's based on who he is. He says, look, if I'll confess it, he's faithful and just to forgive me. That means he sends it away. He remembers it no more. Places as far as the east is from the west, the psalmist says. He remembers it no more, Isaiah says. Micah says he places it in the depths of the sea. Because of who he is and what he's done, he does exactly what he said. He will forgive us. He will send our sin away. And then it says this, he will cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Not just part of it, but all of it. So we see that David takes ownership of his sin, of his missing the mark. He takes ownership of his transgression, his rebellion. He takes ownership of his iniquity, those past deeds, those things that he had done that maybe where his thinking was twisted or perverted. He says, God, it was my sin. Against you and you only have I sinned, David says, and he took ownership and he confessed it. You see, an undivided heart is an honest heart. And an honest heart will lead me to take responsibility for my choices and my action. And when I'm wrong, I'll admit it. And I'll confess it. And because of who he is and what he's done, thank God for forgiveness and thank God for cleansing that comes through the finished work of Jesus on the cross. I encourage you today, take a look at your heart. Do you have an honest heart before God? Do you want to be open and transparent before God? An undivided heart, a heart that seeks him above all else. will be an honest heart. And we have a picture here of it, of David, a man after God's own heart who became honest about what he had done that was wrong. I pray you have a blessed day. I pray you walk with Jesus today. Let Jesus be Jesus in you today, and walk with an undivided heart and be honest before a holy God. Have a blessed day. Thank you so much for watching Complete in Christ as we strive to teach you about the Christ life. And we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and may you have a blessed day walking with Jesus.